Okay, so I really did not want to do this video. I've been like, I don't know, maybe against it because like I want to do a full reading wrap up and like talk about every single book. But then I just decided I'll do this mid-year reading wrap up and then I'll do the other mid-year reading wrap up at the end of the year, and then I'll do a full reading wrap up if you want to watch like both videos combined. So that's what it will basically be, but it will be me talking about it in like December. And this is my mid-year reading wrap up. And this is my reading journal. So let's open it. I don't need my MacBook on my lap anymore. I don't even know why I had it on my lap in the first place. So I'm going to carefully set it on the ground. And you can see I'm wearing the iconic sweatshirt that we always wear, or that I wear sometimes. Not always. It's Sunday, June 30th, and this is my mid-year reading wrap-up. I don't know. I'm going to be like one of those YouTubers that like does their little intro after their like intro and dances. Dance with me. I don't know. I just crack myself up a lot. And then I have my current read, which is Beach Read. This is my first time reading it, I know. And then I have my phone, iPhone 13 mini, and then my AirPods are like back there. I have the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. And then what I'm filming you guys on is the DJI Pocket 2 thingy majiggy. Okay, this is the reading journal. And then right here I have my 2024 TBR. So I only have 2 of them checked off. Once I read Beach Read, I'll have another one checked off, but I didn't check it off yet, just in case I DNF it. But I really don't think I'm going to DNF it. I'm like over halfway through it, so hopefully I don't. But here's my 2024 TBR. I'm going to say all of them, and then I'm going to tell you which ones I've already read. All the Bright Places, See You Yesterday, Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, Cruel Prince series, Caraval series, Children of Dune, Once Again, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Beach Read, Check and Mate, and Better Than the Movies. I've read See You Yesterday and Check and Mate, but I'm about to have Beach Read crossed off. It's like very basic. And then 2024, my goal for the year is 50 books. I've read over half that. I've read about like 26 or 27, which seems like not a lot, but like you gotta groove with me here. This year I was in my, I'll show you the page. This year I was in the worst reading slump I've ever been in. It was like, I'll talk about it when I get to it, but it was the worst reading slump I've ever been in. So keep that in mind when I say how many books I've read at the end of this video. And I don't even know, I haven't counted them up in a while. Okay, and in January I read 4 books. The first book I read was Every Last Word by Tamara Ireland Stone. This book was 354 pages. Or does that say 364? I can't read my own handwriting, but it's 350 something or 60 something. Okay. I rated this book 4.5 stars. I really like this book. The plot twist had me like, I can only say if you know, you know, because if I try to say something else, I'm going to spoil the entire book, and I don't want to do that. Next book I read in January is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This book is 416 pages, and I rated this book 4 stars. After I read this book, I was convinced that I was only reading books with, like, plot twists, because this book, sorry if that's a spoiler alert, I can put something on the screen that tells you to skip, but this plot twist was a little bit shocking, so yeah. And I didn't even know there was a plot twist in that book. Hi, if you're back. Okay, so next we have Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. This is the second book in the Red Queen series. This book was 464 pages. I rated it 3.75 stars. The rating went down from the first book because I feel like this book was pretty mediocre. It could have been better, and I don't remember the differences. I don't really remember anything from this book. I only remember things from the first book. Like, all three of these books, like, sort of blended together. And then next, I read King's Cage, which is the third book in the Red Queen Quartet. This book is 528 pages. I rated it 3 stars. I thought it was good. Some two characters, they need to, like, end up together, okay? Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that, but yeah. I think I'm sort of Team Maven, but I have not read the last book because after I read this book and I rated it 3 stars, that could show you, I just didn't feel like going back into the series. So I read it probably like 50 pages of the 4th book, and then I sort of DNF'd it because I was like, I can't get into this series anymore. I want to know who ends up with each other and everything, and like how the story ends, but like then again, I don't really want to know. After this point, January was over, and I indicated that on there. I should probably blur that because it literally spoils some of the books. Because, like, how I have it set up is, like, I'll have the title, the author, my star rating, and then the page number, and then a couple of bullet points about the book, and usually the bullet points spoil the book, so that's not, like, the best thing. Okay, so now we're into February, and all the books that I read in February were on Kindle. So I'll probably have to put the covers here. Okay, so the first book I read in February was Pillow Thoughts by Courtney Peppernell. I rated this book 3 stars, and it was 272 pages. I love this book. I really love this book for what it was, like the genre. But I haven't really thought about it after reading it. And I think about some books after reading it, and that's how I know that they're good books. But this book was a poetry book. So it was good, but it was a really fast read because there's literally like 5 words on each page. Not actually, but sort of. And then the second book I read was Pillow Thoughts 2 by Courtney Peppernell. This book was 224 pages, and I rated it 2.5 stars. I thought this book was sort of like a meh read. I really haven't thought about this one either. And I couldn't, if you read something from either of the books and said, which book is it from? I would just guess because I don't really remember anything from either of the books. It was like a 8 o'clock read, and then the other one was like an 8:15 read. They only took me like 15 minutes to read. Even though the first one was 272 pages and the second one was 224. But I thought these books were still good for the genre. They made me like poetry a little bit, but that doesn't mean that I read more poetry books. I'm not really the biggest fan of poetry. Okay, so then next I read I Hate You More by Alexandra Moody. This book was 278 pages, and I rated it 4 stars. I thought this book was an okay read. This got me interested in like the trope or whatever of enemies to lovers. If I'm remembering correctly, they're like forced together, because I read 2 books that were they were literally by the same author, and I feel like they sort of blended together. But I think the main character, like the guy, he's not the main character, he's technically a main character, but I don't think we see things from his point of view. This is so sad that I don't remember this, but I did rate this book 4 stars, which is surprising. Let's just move on. Okay, so next I read If I Had Only Told Her by Laura Nowlin. This book was 416 pages. I rated it 4.75 stars. I almost cried while reading this book, but it wasn't like a cry like when I was reading the first book. It was sort of like a more of a disappointed cry. I was still sad too about the book, but I already knew what happened, and I've already went through those emotions. If you don't know, I don't think I've actually ever talked about this on this channel, but if you're like one of my friends, then you know, I finished If You Had Been With Me in my math class. So not while the teacher was teaching. I finished it like when we had like work time and I was done with everything that we were doing in that class, like the assignment for that day. So I was reading it and then I finished it. And I have both of these books on my Kindles. I was so happy when I found out that you can get it on Kindle earlier than you can like go pick it up from Barnes & Noble or whatever. So that's what I did. I got it from Kindle. And I wish I would have got the real cover, but like, what can you do? But I don't think it was as good as the first book. I feel like it could have been much better. Don't come judge me for that. Okay, so the last book I read in February was Stuck With You by Alexandra Moody, which is the same author as I Hate You More. This book was 276 pages, and I rated it 3 stars. I like how this book talked about COVID. I remember that from the book. I feel like it was one of the first books to like talk about COVID in like an actual way. And like I feel like people don't want to talk about it yet because it's only been like 4 years. But still, I feel like we need to like talk about it. And like reading this book was just like, oh yes, this did happen. Like you forget that we were literally in a pandemic like a couple of years ago. I mean, I remember things from the pandemic, but I don't really remember much. But I thought this was a good read. I don't know why I only rated it 3 stars. I don't know what was going through my mind when rating this, but probably not much. And then February's over, and let me reset so that I can get my March books out. March was like, it wasn't really the start of my reading slump. It was a bit of the start of my reading slump, but it wasn't like that bad. But I feel like I read these books pretty fast, but I just had so much going on in March. It was just like crazy. The first book I read in March was One of Us is Lying by Karen M. And I'm not going to butcher that last name, so I'm not going to say it. This book was 358 pages. I rated it 4.5 stars. I thought this was a pretty easy and good book, and I don't know why, but I sort of guessed what was going to happen, and I just thought I was crazy, like, for thinking that's what happened, but, like, I was sort of right, but I was sort of wrong at the same time, because it wasn't, like, we're actually not going to say much about that. Good book. I was going to throw it across my room, but no. Okay, so next I read One of Us is Next by Karen M, and then M last name that I don't want to butcher. This book was 416 pages. I rated it 4.25 stars. I like the different concept in this book. I was like, what else can like they do? But I feel like this book was pretty good. But it almost felt like the first book, but not quite. But I wish they would have had more of the original characters in there. I don't like how they brought in like new characters. I wanted to see the old characters because if this is a series, you don't just bring in new characters and barely talk about the old characters. So next I read One of Us is Back by Karen. This book was 368 pages. I rated it 3.5 stars. I felt like this book was good, but it could have been better. By the time I got to this book, I felt done with the series. So that like goes into consideration when you're thinking about my rating. I'm sorry, but I was just like, what else can they do? And I really forgot what happened in this book. I'm sorry. You might get mad at me for that, but I really did. And yeah, I don't really remember anything from this book. So sorry if that offends you, but... And then March was over. I only read 3 books. I know you guys are going to be disappointed in me. I already know it. But I read 2 books in April. Isn't that so much fun? Like, really? So the first book I read in April... Girl in Pieces by Kathleen Glasgow. I started this book on the last day of March and finished it on the first day of April. So I didn't know whether to count this for March or April, but I counted it for April because having read 1 book in April is sort of sad. This book was 448 pages and I rated it 4.5 stars. I thought it was pretty good. It's just some of the language and the content in the book was pretty interesting. I've never read a book like this before, and I like to see her recovery and like what happens to people after they go through this. So it was a pretty good like eye-opener for me because I really didn't understand what it meant to go through this. And then the book that got me into the biggest reading slump, Dune by Frank Herbert. What do I want to say about you? It's like all cracked everywhere because like I had it in my school bag, I had it in my Trapper Keeper, I had it everywhere because I was carrying it everywhere, but I wasn't reading it And it was just like, it was getting a little bit roughed up because it was like the same places and then it just kept getting worse and worse. Okay, so when I say the page counts for this, I look it up on Google. I don't go to the very end of the book and say what it is. But on Google, they said the page count is 896 pages. But this is only like 650 pages, so I'm confused. I rated this book 3 stars. I liked the book, don't get me wrong. It's just I hate third person. I hate third person. Yeah, I can't stand third person. This got me into a month reading slump. It was probably more because I finished it it was probably like the first few days of May because I was like, I have to get this book done. So I read it in like 2 days when I actually like went down and was like reading it. But my friends kept asking me, what are you reading? What are you reading? Reading anything new? And I was like, no, I haven't had much time to read. Even though I did have the time. I did have the time. It's just I wasn't reading that book. And I felt this book was too long. But I do like the main characters. I like Lady Jessica. I like Paul. I like Johnny. This book is 2 thumbs up. Like, I like the characters and I like the plot and all that. Can they put it in first person, though? Like, switch every chapter. I don't know. It was just a little bit annoying to me. Yeah, and April was over. You may be noticing that I only have 3 books here. I read a lot of books on my Kindle in May, so take that into consideration. So, my May reads. This is going to be fun. I read the most books in May. First book I read, Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. One pet peeve with this before we get further into my rating and everything. I do not like the size of this book. Let's compare it to a normal size book. Like what? I could not stand the size of this book. I'm sorry, but I could not. So this book was 256 pages. Felt like way longer when you have to read like that. And then you're constantly looking and trying not to crease. With this book, I knew that something happened. I had to read it a couple of times, then looked it up on Google, confirmed what I thought. And another thing happened, and I was so confused. I was like, how did this book just end? Looked it up on Google, made me think something completely different, and then I told one of my friends something different from the truth, which I do sometimes. Like, don't get me wrong, I do that sometimes. But I felt bad that I was wrong, because my dad told me it's that why you don't want to read the third one? And I was like, yeah, I don't want to read it because of that reason. And then he's like, no, that doesn't actually happen. Something else happened. So I was like, oh, I'll read the third book. So he got me the third book. Okay, so we read a book in school. So I just counted that one. I'm not going to talk about it. So the next thing I read, it wasn't technically a book, but it was over 100 pages. And there were so many words on the page. Like, I counted it as a book. Sue me, I don't care. It's my reading journal and my book count for the year. I can do what I want with it. So I read Taylor Swift, A Magical Era by Cherry Bombay. This was a magazine, 121 pages, and I rated this book 5 stars. I learned a lot about Taylor Swift from this magazine, like I did not know stuff. One of my friends literally got me like a Taylor Swift biography that I still have to read. I read like 5 pages of it, but it was just like, I read it at like midnight and it was just like, I had my book light on and the pages are so like shiny, it was crazy. Why are we not talking about this book? We have to be talking about this. It's technically not a book, it's a magazine, but still. So next I read is this book, My Life with the Walter Boys by Ali Novak. This book is 400 pages and I rated it 4.5 stars. I thought this book was really good. I also loved the show. But the show and the book are 2 different things. If you watch the show before reading the book or read the book before you watch the show, you're going to be like, are we sure that this is the same thing? Because it's like 2 different things. It's all the same character names, but it's like a completely different plot. So just go into that, like think about that before you start reading it. Yeah, this book took me like maybe 3 or 4 days to read. I think I like Cole more than Alex though. He's sort of more like Conrad, I guess. Okay, so next I read Dear Mom, I'm Sorry by Mary O'Hara. This book I read on Kindle. It was 228 pages and I rated it 3 stars. The ending was sad, but you can sort of infer like what's going to happen from it. And like, it was a pretty good book. I don't want to really say more about this book, so yeah. Next, I read Happily Ever After by Kira Cass. I read this book on Kindle. I found out that this book was on Kindle Unlimited. I thought it was just like a standalone book that Kira Cass had written, and then I looked more into it, and I realized that it was novellas from the Selection series, so that was just like, what? This book was 416 pages, and I rated it 5 stars. I think that the Selection series is amazing. It's my favorite book series right now, and I'm glad that I re-entered the world again with this book, and I thought it was a really great book. And I think you can infer which book I read next after this. The Selection by Kira Cass, because once I read the Happily Ever After one, I sort of forgot some things that happened in the books. It was like, why not just read them again? 328 pages. I rated it 6 stars. It is the only series that I rate 6 stars, and I know 6 stars isn't technically a rating, but I like this series a lot, so that's why. So this book was really good, but everything I said about this book and my little bullet points sort of gave away like the ending of the book and like everything, so. And then the next book I read was The Elite by Kira Cass. This is the second book in the Selection series. It's 336 pages, 6 stars. And the only bullet point I wrote was great continuation of the series. So the next book I read was The One by Kira Cass. 368 pages and 6 stars. I liked how the ending of the book, just like the last 100 pages of the book, was a little bit like, but it started to speed up, and yeah, I just thought it was pretty good. And there were sad things and everything. And the last book was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Okay, so this video is coming out tomorrow. It's July 19th, and I'm editing, and I realized that I never gave my page count and rating for Fourth Wing. So Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, 512 pages and 4 stars. I read this in the last 2 days of May. I really liked this book. It was just like the font was a little bit small, but it wasn't too small, and it felt a little long, but it was like a good read still, and I read it pretty fast. And I feel like one of the characters in this book needs to like go jump off a bridge or something. I know that's sort of intense, but it's just like, and if you know this series and if you read both the books, then you'll understand which character I'm talking about. Okay, so now we're into June, and today's, like I said at the start of this video, I think today is June 30th, so it's the last day of June. I might finish Beach Read today, so I might add it to this video, but if I don't, it doesn't matter. Okay, so my first June read was Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, which is the second book in the Empyrean series. Second book, it's the book after Fourth Wing. And this book was 640 pages. I first rated it 4.25 stars, and then I changed it to 3 stars a couple of days ago. I thought there was too much, arguing, and 2 characters needed to talk together. And if that happened, we could have cut, half of this book out. And the text size could have been this much bigger in the book. Because if you compare the text size from Iron Flame to Fourth Wing, you can see that this text size is actually way smaller, which is, I did not know that, but it's crazy. I really did feel like this book was too long. It got me into a couple week reading slump. So it was the middle of June, or the first 10 days of June when I finished this. Some of the plot twists in this book, and then the very end was a little bit crazy. So the next book is See You Yesterday by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This book was 419 pages. I rated it 4 stars. I liked the two main characters' relationship and all of that. I thought it was a cute book, but I feel like this book could have been shorter, like Iron Flame. It could have been this much shorter. Why did we need to make this book so long? Romance books are usually short. Can we compare these two? I mean, the text size was pretty big. And lastly in this video, we have Check and Mate by Allie Hazelwood. This book was 347 pages. I rated this book 5 stars for now. If I think about it more, I might change the rating. If I read it again, I might change the rating, but we're going to see. Something about this book was really good. I love the cover, and it was about a 2-day read. Today's Sunday, but last Sunday, I started this book. I read about half of it, and then I didn't read it on Monday or Tuesday, and then I finished it on Wednesday. So I'm calling it a 2-day read because it took me 2 days when I was actually reading it to finish it, but it was technically a 4-day read. This was my introduction to the author Allie Hazelwood. I thought her writing's pretty good, but this is like her only young adult book, so I'm like interested to see like what her adult books are, because this felt like an adult book, but it's a young adult book. I don't like the epilogue. I feel like the way they ended the story, like the epilogue, it's not even from the main character's point of view or even the love interest point of view. It's literally like a newspaper thing. And like how they end it in like the very last chapter before the epilogue, it sort of like left it open, like you can like infer what happens, but I don't like that. So yeah, but I would recommend this book to people. I would recommend most of these books to my friends. If it's like, I would recommend it to them only if it's over like a 4-star. I would recommend it to them. If it's under a 3.5, then I would not recommend it probably. I've never rated a book under 2.5 stars. I rated that one poetry book 2.5 stars, but I haven't rated anything under that because I really like books, and usually books for me are usually around 4 or 5 stars because like I'm getting into like the really good books like Beach Read, Happy Place, All the Bright Places, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Cruel Prince series. I did not add Caraval or Once Upon a Broken Heart to that list because it's in third person, and I read like 100 pages of Caraval, and then I DNF'd it for now because I wasn't in the mood for a fantasy, and 2, it's just bored me a little bit, the book so far. So I was just like, I'm gonna DNF it till when it's like a little bit colder because I want to read like all the summer vibe books and all that. And once I do that, we'll be able to read all those books. And the Cruel Prince trilogy and the one after it, I don't know. And then I want to get like the Stolen Hair book and all that. But I think we should be able to meet our goal of 50 books. I'm going to count all the books in this video and I'll be right back. Okay, so we've read 27 books so far in 2024. I think that's pretty good. We're over halfway of our goal, and we should be able to reach the 50 books. I have about 25 books on my TBR right now. And right now I'm going to try and finish Beach Read. I want to read at least another 100 pages in this sitting. I'm literally at page 199, so, and this book has like 358. So I have like 158 pages left, basically. So let's do this. Peace out. Bye, and I'll see you guys in the next video.